Welcome to the News9 Plus Show on the world's first news and current affairs OTT platform, News9 Plus. On the 11th of December, a 5-judge bench of the Supreme Court upheld the government's abrogation of Article 370. Now, later in the day, Home Minister Amit Shah said that Pakistan Occupied Kashmir belongs to India and that no one can take it away. This is not the first time a top government official has said this. Earlier this year, Defence Minister Rajnath Singh said PoK belongs to India. And don't forget, there's a unanimous 1994 resolution in Parliament for India to get back Pakistan Occupied Kashmir. Now, what will India's Mission PoK look like, assuming there is one? Joining me to discuss this are author and filmmaker Iqbal Chand Malhotra and my colleague Aditya Raj Kaul. Iqbal, welcome back to the News9 Plus Show.
Thank you, Sandeep.
Aditya, does the Supreme Court verdict yesterday strengthen the government's case for recapturing Pakistan Occupied Kashmir or taking it back?
Well, India always had a strong case, but now that the Modi government abrogated or nullified or abolished Article 370 on 5th August 2019, a massive political step, a policy change happened. Thereafter, after 4 long years, we have had a Supreme Court stamp on that verdict, clearly indicating that the executive and the judiciary and the might of the Indian Parliament is behind this decision. So one, an unthinkable, unprecedented Article 370 nullification happens. It is implemented down on ground. The terror graph overall is reduced, although terrorism and 370 have nothing to do with each other. At the same time, we see a crumbling Pakistan. We see terror attacks happening every other day. We see a clash between the civilian government and the Pakistan army, clearly indicating that India wouldn't have to do much, but Pakistan will crumble itself. Now, I'm not saying, and certainly it would be difficult to imagine a situation where physically we may not be able to retain immediately Pakistan Occupied Kashmir, but who knows? If you would have asked me 10 years ago if 370 will go, I would have said no, it's a joke. BJP has been saying that for decades together. If you were to ask me that Balochistan will erupt the way it has erupted over the last 2 years, I would have said no. Baloch population is very few people. If you would also had asked me that Khyber Pakhtunkhwa will reignite after Taliban's takeover of the Afghanistan, I would have said no. You know, Taliban and Pakistan go hand in gloves and, you know, have been using each other as a puppet. But now TTP has gained momentum. They are using US snipers. They are using US equipment and weapons. So it clearly indicates that India's imagination, India's dream, India's resolution inside Indian Parliament of reoccupying or taking back what is our own Pakistan Occupied Kashmir would be a reality someday. How soon? I can't say that.
Right. You know, 4 years is a long time in history. And Iqbal, I want to go back to about 75 years. Undivided Kashmir, this is an area of interest for you. You've written many books around those parts. But explain for us, you know, what the loss of Gilgit, Baltistan and Pakistan Occupied Kashmir did for India. I mean, it completely cut us off the...
It cut us off the grid
Silk
that
Road.
connects us.
Yeah, the land connect. Yeah, it cut us off the Silk Road, which we've been trading over for thousands of years.
Well, let me say one thing that Pakistan Occupied Kashmir, Gilgit, Baltistan and the other regions of that area, which are Kohe, Khizar, Ishkoman, Chitral and Hunza, were all an integral part of India when the Maharaja of Kashmir acceded to the Indian Union on the 26th of October 1947. Unfortunately, this region was also within the sights of the British government, which wanted to use this region to spy on the Soviet nuclear program. And they had 1 acoustic monitoring station and 2 seismic monitoring stations in the Gilgit, Baltistan area. And they were also carrying on aerial reconnaissance flights from Chaklala Air Base near Rawalpindi and Risalpur in NWFP. So the control of NWFP and the Gilgit-Baltistan area post-independence became vital for the British. They had to leave India, but they also had to stay on if they wanted to become a nuclear power, which they could only achieve by spying on the erstwhile Soviet Union. So this is the history about it. And if you go into greater detail, I mean, you can read my books, Dark Secrets and Kashmir's Untold Story Declassified. You will discover that there was a deep-rooted conspiracy which began when Lord Mountbatten went to London in the month of May 1947, and he was then instructed by Prime Minister Attlee and the Chief of MI6, Major General Menezes, to actually expedite the transfer of power from 30th of June 1948 to 15th August 1947, so that the British could unimpededly continue to spy on the Soviet nuclear program and also obtain uranium samples from this Xinjiang, which is adjacent to Gilgit, Baltistan area. So the conspiracy was with the British, and they used us to actually put it into effect. So this legacy has been handed over to us. Now in 2023, in theory, it's part of India, but in practice, it's not. And it's not even in the hands of Pakistan today, because the Chinese have de facto control over the Gilgit-Baltistan area.
I was coming to that, Aditya. Yeah, I mean, like what we just heard from Iqbal, the fact that it was always an imperial playground, so to speak. This entire region, it's so vital. It's a strategic crossroads between empires. And today those empires have changed. I mean, it's instead of the Soviet Union, you have the Central Asian states, you have China, nuclear armed China, which holds a part of Jammu and Kashmir. You have nuclear armed Pakistan that holds part of Jammu and Kashmir, and of course India in the center. Does this kind of complicate things a lot more? The fact that Iqbal mentioned you have the Chinese economic corridor, the CPAC, going through Gilgit-Baltistan. Does that complicate things for us?
It does complicate things. CPAC has been a challenge. India has been speaking about it continuously, not doing enough, apart from merely speaking and issuing foreign ministry statements.
Right.
But that clearly indicates that CPAC does pass through Pakistan Occupied Kashmir, and China has been using PoK, Balochistan, and Pakistan overall as a colony.
Right.
We've had several examples of natural resources being taken away from Gilgit-Baltistan, from PoK, and from Balochistan. So clearly, Chinese have a deep-rooted interest for years together, particularly in the last decade or so. They've increased their investment in CPEC, natural resources, mining, etc., all through this region. But there's another aspect, and that aspect is, what do the local people want? Over the last 2 decades, we've seen the Pakistan army push in a lot of retired generals and retired military personnel and give them accommodation in Pakistan Occupied Kashmir.
Right.
And this is happening only because they want to invest in the Punjabi population inside Pakistan Occupied Kashmir. A lot of common people have resentment, they're upset. In fact, I'll tell you, in 2018, I did a story on a Urdu newspaper in Pakistan Occupied Kashmir, which had done a survey along with a local activist, and they interviewed round about 35 to 40,000 people all across Pakistan Occupied Jammu and Kashmir to ask them, do you want to stay with Pakistan or do you want an independent Jammu and Kashmir?
Right.
And most of the people actually opted for, it was around 73% people who said we want independence from Pakistan. So that is the growing resentment in the common people. They have not got the rights. They're always treated as second-class citizens to the Punjabis and the Pakistani citizens. So I think India needs to do much more to reach out to that population. You already see a lot of exiled Kashmiris from PoK, be it Mirpuris or people from all across Kotli, Muzaffarabad and other places who are settled in US, UK, who keep on speaking at the United Nations, at the UNHRC, etc., and appealing to the world, help us, hear us out.
Right.
And you speak about other atrocities in Pakistan, why not about us?
In fact, on that note, let's watch an excerpt from our story Mission PoK on India's dilemmas in recapturing PoK, but specifically this quote from our former spy chief Vikram Sood, where he basically speaks to what Aditya was just mentioning, the fact that there is a lot of resentment within PoK, and that could actually work towards India's advantage. Let's watch.
पाकिस्तान की सरकार को भी स्पष्ट बताना चाहता हूं कि कश्मीर की रट लगाकर कुछ हासिल नहीं होगा। भारत की संसद में पीओके को लेकर एक सर्वसम्मत प्रस्ताव पारित है। वह भारत का ही हिस्सा था, है और आगे भी हम मानते हैं।
August 1947. India got its freedom and Pakistan was created. Since then till now, there is an unfinished business of partition. And that is taking back its territories of Gilgit, Baltistan and PoK being held by Pakistan. Is war an option, or can we win back our territories in the International Court of Justice?
The very law that created Pakistan itself makes J&K part of India. If Pakistan disowns this law, there is no Pakistan. The National Command Authority and all are all subservient to Pakistan military. So the possibility of a major loss translating itself to use a nuclear device is possible.
So you have to have a full idea of what this entails, militarily, economically, politically, internationally. Then you can think about acting or planning.
Reuniting Gilgit-Baltistan and PoK.
So Iqbal, our story basically looked at the three options before India, the legal route, the military route, and of course the covert route, which Vikram Sood mentioned. Now Aditya said that he couldn't imagine all these things happening, abrogation of Article 370, it was almost unheard of. The speed with which events have taken place in Kashmir, does that lead you to believe that there could be a roadmap for the reintegration of PoK as well at some point?
I think we should be worried about getting back the areas in eastern Ladakh that the Chinese occupied post 2020.
Right.
Because the Chinese have moved their soldiers into Gilgit-Baltistan, and they are building these two dams there, the Dimer Basha Dam and the Bunji Dam, at a cost of $28 billion, which is going to supply 90% of the electricity to northern China. So when they're building these dams and they are going to be generating 40 gigawatt hours of electricity for northern China and to pump the gas and oil from Gwadar all the way up into Xinjiang, into northern China, do you think the Chinese will ever let anybody touch it? I mean, they will defend it as if it was their own territory, because this whole region is now a quasi-state, as Aditya said.
Absolutely.
It's a province of China.
It's a province of China, and China has kind of displaced, from what you're saying, China seems to have displaced Pakistan in the Kashmir dispute. And that would be
Pakistan is like a local chowkidar over there. The Chinese are the rulers, the zamindars of that area. So you are going to have to deal with the Chinese. You're already dealing with them on eastern Ladakh. So do you want to open another front? That's a political decision.
That's a political decision, and it's a dilemma. And like Aditya said, I mean, who knows in the future how things could play out. But Aditya, those 24 seats in the Jammu and Kashmir Assembly, which is been set aside for people from PoK, at what stage does this become really attractive for the people of PoK to kind of vote to join Indian Kashmir?
It's difficult to say, because this is a symbolic gesture. It has been happening for a long time, and this time around again these seats have been kept. My own opinion is that people who have exiled from PoK and maybe a little more could be accommodated, who are settled elsewhere and want to come to India, and those people should be given these seats.
Right.
And there should be at least, if not 24, at least some of them, because they are Haqdar, they are very much it's like their bunyadi haq.
You mean refugees displaced from PoK would actually get those 24 seats?
They won't, but I believe they should, ideally, because these seats will anyways lie vacant whenever the assembly is in functional, and we'll have a government in power. Perhaps after the Supreme Court order, there could be elections next year. At least there will be the general elections and thereafter the assembly elections. But clearly, India needs to do much more, because we've been quoting this 94 resolution for a very long time. We've been saying that PoK is ours. There have been several statements from various prime ministers, the foreign ministry. But I think a little more activity by the foreign ministry, by the government is important. We are, of course, witnessing Pakistan crumbling economically, politically, and the security situation also going down the drain. But ultimately, there needs to be more, push to retain PoK.
Yeah, there needs to be more push, Iqbal, and well, like you were saying that China has kind of become the the chowkidar or the zamindar, the zamindar in Pakistan. So you're actually looking at a state that can't fail now because it's being backed. It's got the sovereign guarantee of the Chinese. But going back into history, Iqbal, the plebiscite now in a few days from now, about 20 days from now, you're looking at the 75th anniversary of the plebiscite, where India took the matter to the United Nations, and we're calling it the Nehru's Himalayan blunder. How big a strategic blunder was this 75 years later? How badly has it affected our chances on the global stage?
It was a monumental blunder because the fact of the matter was this, that the then government of India, which of newly independent India, was heavily influenced by the British and heavily influenced by Lord Mountbatten. So I think that the biggest villain in this plot was the Prime Minister of Britain, Mr. Attlee, and Lord Mountbatten, because they ensured that this legacy of bitterness and violence would continue, would get in fact institutionalized. So we are in fact experiencing till today the consequences of those decisions at that point of time. I don't think anybody ever envisaged the extent to which this would continue to harm our polity for so many years, and will continue to do so. I don't see any end to it in at least in my lifetime.
Right, that's a very dark assessment. In fact, our story says exactly the same. Nehru's Himalayan blunder. Let's watch.
Long years ago, we made a tryst with destiny.
If Nehruji had treated Jammu and Kashmir like any other princely states of that time, then Kashmir would have been like any other state, peacefully, fully united.
After 70 years, you have nothing to do except to criticize Jawaharlal Nehru.
There was a dying need on the part of Mr. Nehru to emerge as an international statesman. And in the process, national interest was completely staked and compromised.
By debunking my facts and figures, they are actually disowning Nehruji.
So Aditya, Nehru's Himalayan blunder 75 years ago. Do you see the road ahead, the next 25 years, India in 2049 on a much better wicket when it comes to Kashmir?
I am hopeful. As I said, 5th August 2019 for me was that turning point, because personally I had believed that BJP almost has given up. The Congress had given up years ago.
Right.
And although there is a lot of rhetoric, there are a lot of political statements that are being made inside the parliament, outside in rallies, but I don't think this is achievable. But the political arithmetic, the security calculations were made in such a way that this unprecedented step happened. I believe that slowly and steadily, not just the Indian Army and the security forces, but politically also, there will be rebalancing that will happen in Jammu and Kashmir, and particularly the regional political parties will have to give away this aspect of autonomy or self-determination or 370, whatever they call it, and look towards a new direction. A new politics will have to germinate and take seeds and come up in Kashmir. That is the only way forward. Otherwise, India is not going to look the other way. Home Minister Amit Shah already yesterday in the parliament, earlier he had attacked Nehru, and now he said that we are making a separate prison at a cost of 105 crores for terrorists, and no stone pelters will be given any government jobs. So these are strong steps that are being taken. In the last 4 years, I haven't seen any massive stone pelting taking place like it used to. Even terror attacks have reduced drastically. The infiltration will carry on. Rajouri is becoming a new headache for the security forces. But I believe there's a stronger grip politically and for the security forces as well. And that will only increase in the next many years and decades. But just like Mr. Iqbal pointed out, I think China is the imminent threat that we have realized only after Galwan. There's a new realization, there's a new policy in place, but I think there's again much more strategically that needs to be done on the China front.
What, Iqbal, what do you see the new government doing? I mean, I'm saying a new government because this government is literally at the end of its term. But next year, when the new government takes over, what do you think are going to be the priorities when it comes to the frontiers with China and Pakistan, specifically in Kashmir?
I feel, my view is that as the Pakistani state starts deteriorating, it is going to become an autonomous republic of China. I mean, my view is that by 2049, Pakistan will be the Pakistan Autonomous Republic of Greater China. So the question of actually getting any territory back from them means getting the territory back from the Chinese. Now, if the Chinese are going to dominate our economy, we have a very unfavorable balance of trade running into hundreds of billions of dollars. How are we going to stand up to them unless the government undertakes a serious policy perspective and says that this is how we are going to advance industrially and militarily to be able to secure our borders? Otherwise, without that, thinking through this over a long-term time frame that goes beyond 25, 30 years, that's the only way to ensure that we remain protected and our interests remain protected.
Right, yeah. A long-term time frame is needed to protect our interests. Thank you very much, Iqbal, for joining us on the show. Stay with us, Aditya, while we continue to track news and current affairs on the News9 Plus Show. While on the topic of Pakistan, the wars in Israel and Ukraine have taken the world's attention away from what's going on the AfPak border. Over the last month, Pakistan has pushed out over 1 million Afghans back into Afghanistan. It's a recipe for disaster, as our story tells you. Let's watch.
More than 1.7 million Afghan refugees are now facing expulsion. Their lives have been thrown off balance owing to Pakistan's expulsion policy announced on October 3rd, which imposed October 31 as the deadline for all illegal refugees and migrants to leave Pakistan. Citing security concerns, the acting Prime Minister of Pakistan, Anwar-ul-Kakkar, said that TTP attacks have risen by 60% since the Taliban regained control of Afghanistan.
पाकिस्तान में बदअमनी फैलाने में एक बड़ा किरदार गैर कानूनी तारीक़ वतन का है। इसलिए रियासत पाकिस्तान ने इन अफराद को 1 नवंबर से वापस अपने ममालिक में भेजने का फ़ैसला किया। पाकिस्तान में एक बड़ी तादाद में गैर मुल्की अफराद गैर कानूनी तौर पर मुकीम हैं, जिनमें अक्सरियत अफ़गान शहरियों की है। दहशतगर्दी और मुजरमाना सरगर्मियों में मुलव्वस अक्सर अफराद का ताल्लुक़ इन्हीं गैर कानूनी तारीक़ वतन से है। इसके बावजूद हुकूमत पाकिस्तान ने अब तक इन गैर कानूनी तौर पर मुकीम गैर मुल्कियों की रज़ाकाराना वतन वापसी को तरजीह दी।
I think the Pakistanis have taken this decision as a kind of a pressure point against the Afghans. The fact is that they have been demanding that the Taliban regime in Afghanistan starts taking action against the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan fellows who are in, or who the Pakistanis allege have been given sanctuary inside Afghanistan. The Taliban do not, or at least are not taking action against them. The Taliban tell the Pakistanis that, look, this is your problem, you need to sort it out. To expel these people will create a lot of problems for us inside Afghanistan. We can facilitate discussions between you and them, but any discussion or any political compromise is by definition a compromise. So you need to talk to these people. The Pakistanis are not agreed to that.
A recipe for disaster indeed, Aditya, and this is terrible, the new attack. Tell us about what we know so far.
Well, there have been attacks frequently happening in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa of Pakistan, mainly by the TTP, but there are new splinter fractions and Islamist groups that are coming up in the region, perhaps supported by the Taliban or getting a lot of equipment that the US had left behind in Afghanistan.
Right.
And this time around, there's been a fresh suicide attack in Dera Ismail Khan at a police station, where at early morning at around 3 a.m. There was in fact an attack. 2 suicide blasts took place where people with suicide vests went inside the police station and there was a blast. Due to that extent of that blast, there was a collapse of the roof of the police station and a lot of casualties were reported. As of now, Reuters as well as the local media personnel are reporting that 24 Pakistan Army soldiers have been killed. There are 34 others who are injured, many of them who remain critical at this stage. We also know that apart from the suicide bombers, there were others who were involved in this terror attack who were being used as snipers, and they were using a lot of US equipment that was left behind by the Americans in Afghanistan.
So Aditya, this pushing out of Afghans from Pakistan, that's forcible expulsion, it's unprecedented. How does this make matters worse in a region that's already seeing so many terror attacks?
Well, Pakistan is in a catch-22. Pakistan has helped Afghanistan's Taliban and the Haqqani network for years together, in the hope that someday, when the Taliban comes to power, they will act as their own puppets or their own B team.
Right.
That hasn't happened. Ever since Taliban has taken control, the Haqqani network and the other faction of the Taliban has had differences with the Pakistani deep state, the ISI and the Pakistan army. They've also not been in good terms with the political establishment. A lot of abuses has gone to Bilawal Bhutto, Shehbaz Sharif and others. Apart from that, we've also seen Pakistan taking steps against Afghanistan, be it the Durand Line, where we had unprecedented scale of almost like a war-like situation where a lot of missiles and mortar shells were being reportedly being thrown at each other. Apart from that, we also saw Sirajuddin Haqqani, who was using a Pakistani passport for the Doha talks, his passport being cancelled. Now the Pakistan says that they did so after informing Sirajuddin Haqqani, but nobody knows the reality because Afghanistan hasn't come clear on it. But thereafter they come up with a statement that we have millions of refugees from Afghanistan for years together, and that is a huge, puts a huge impact on the Pakistani economy. And at a time when the economy is crumbling, we need to take this step. And these are illegal people. They do not have Pakistani identification and they need to move out. So immediate orders were made by the Pakistani caretaker Prime Minister Anwarul Haq, who said that they need to leave and they have to give a certain amount of dollars as an exit fees also per person. So almost like a few hundred or a few thousand Afghan, these refugees have gone to Pakistan, but who knows? A lot of these refugees have lost their livelihoods, their refugee camps, their temporary structures have been completely destroyed by Pakistan, and they could join the Taliban.
Absolutely.
They could be either killed by the Taliban or be fresh recruits. So this is a new episode that is coming up. Apart from that, Pakistan, during the investigation and when they found out that Sirajuddin Haqqani had a Pakistani passport, also realized that there are thousands of Afghan refugees who were using Pakistani fake passports and they were working in Saudi Arabia. So now Saudi Arabia is stuck because they have sent these fake passports to Pakistan to identify, which have been identified, but what to do with the 12,000 or 15,000 Afghan refugees that are working in Saudi Arabia on the quota that Pakistan had.
Right. Amazing. I mean, this is one region of the world that never ceases to surprise you. Meanwhile, the Houthis have struck at merchant shipping yet again. Another attack on an oil tanker in the Bab el-Mandab Straits was reported. And I'm joined by Commodore Srikanth Kesnur, defense analyst and someone extremely familiar with what's going on right now. Commodore Srikanth, welcome back to the News9 Plus Show.
Thank you. Good to be back again with you.
Commodore Srikanth, do tell us how you're reading what's playing out right now in the Bab el-Mandab. Are these your worst fears coming to life right now?
Sandeep, as you may be aware, I was there posted in Nairobi in Kenya during the peak of the piracy in Gulf of Aden between 2008 to 12. And at that time, we thought that this was the worst that this region had seen, the almost daily attacks of piracy. But I think what is happening now seems like a really familiar script happening all over again, except that now technology seems to have gone up in leaps and bounds, and we can talk about that. And it's again happening at a major sort of global traffic junction where a lot of traffic goes. It tends to disrupt global traffic. This is happening in what is already an existing, say, conflict or fragile zone where lots of states lack capacities to handle existing issues, and then you are adding more to this. And this also plugs in with the rest of the issues that are happening on land. So this is a crazy cocktail of circumstances, and Houthis are simply upping the ante when it comes to the maritime theatre. This, of course, tells us that there is no such thing as a quiet day in the maritime realm, whether it is illegal fishing, whether it's terrorism, whether it's piracy, whether it's people or gun smuggling or WMD proliferation. A lot of things are happening over the seas, on the seas. So this is in many ways many fears, coming true, and we were hoping that these lanes would be safe and free after the last major piracy threat was sort of put down, but it seems like something happening there again.
Commodore Aditya this side, I also wanted to ask you about the maritime security and how India is looking at it. A lot of these incidents have been reported over the years, but in the current times when there are two current wars that are underway, a lot of increased activity, and India also has had bilateral ties, maritime ties with a lot of countries. We've had, of course, the Quad that we speak about often, but how invested is India in protecting its maritime borders and, of course, strengthening, all across the sea routes in that region?
No, of course, India is very, very interested, very invested, and in some ways we're obliged to protect our own trade, and a whole lot of that trade, comes from foreign shipping vessels, so we are bound to protect, and these are our areas of interest, primary areas of interest as enunciated in our own maritime strategy documents. So in the maritime world, we say that our neighbors are these seas and these choke points and access points. The geography of Indian Ocean is such that this is a critical access point, an entry and exit point. So we are very much invested here. Now we have had partnerships with other nations, and you mentioned some of them. Recently, as you know, we also taken steps to become a member of the Combined Maritime Force. And then during the last edition, the last time when piracy happened in Gulf of Aden, while we were not part of any coalition, we took an active part in counter-piracy, and in fact, at one point of time, we spotted the highest number of attacks. We had the highest number of pirates in our custody. So I think India plays a very, very important role, whether in countering piracy or countering other threats to maritime order in this region. And I think we are monitoring this very, very closely. At this point of time, the Houthis sort of seem to make it that it is a battle against Israel and Americas, and they're not targeting anyone else. But I'm sure that space is being monitored very, very closely, because at the end of the day, this disrupts global traffic. We must also remember one more thing, that India has a high proportion of seafarers. So when any ship is hijacked, and it could belong to any country registered anywhere, it's likely to have Indian seafarers, and therefore the safety of Indians is also important to Indian authorities. I think in all ways, from trade, commerce, from military viewpoint, and from human aspects, India would be very, very keenly watching this and kind of discussing what should be the next steps it should be taking in if this sort of trend increases and there are more such instances.
So, Commodore Srikanth, because our sea lanes of communication are directly impacted by what's going on, do you see the Indian Navy actually stepping forward and say joining a coalition task force to enforce, the safety of the SLOCs, or join the American ships who have been shooting down these Houthi missiles?
You see, I think the word coalition has been, at least in the past, a bit of anathema for the Indian policy makers. So I don't know whether in terms of nomenclature they will look at it, but we have taken steps, as we pointed out, moving from being associate member now to moving towards full membership of CMF. The CMF, as you are aware, has two task forces, 151 for counter piracy and 153 for the Gulf of Aden Red Sea activities. So would it seek for India to join, and would India join? That's $1 million question. I do know and think, of course, that India in the past, even when not part of the coalition forces, did lots of active operational coordination at sea, and that's natural for navies to do. often when you take these counter-piracy activities, you could involve the boat of one navy, the helicopter of another, guidance by a third one, and so on and so forth. So operational coordination and interactions at sea between navies are quite common. And I see that India would probably, coordinate much more on a whole lot of operational issues to counter this if it came to that. Whether it would be in form of having escort ships singly or with other countries, escorting our own trade, our own ships, or doing that in form of informal partnerships with others. Last time we had done an international corridor, which we had designated, whether we would designate some such safe corridors where we'll escort ships, or we will do a more active partnership with the Americans in terms of being part of some entity, whether that will take the name of a coalition or it will be called another coordinated task force or something like that, will have to be seen. But I think this has to be seen as a form of a danger or threat, not just to the Americans or the Israelis, but to the traffic as a whole, and in some point of time, possibly to Indian interests too.
Right, and taking up from one of your statements where you spoke of the technology and that the Houthis have deployed, and you've headed the Maritime Warfare Center. How much of a surprise was it for you when the Houthis started assaulting ships with helicopters and firing cruise missiles and ballistic missiles at Wash? I mean, is this the future of warfare, or maritime warfare?
Look, I mean, now we know for long that Houthis have possessed a range of capabilities. After all, when they've been fighting their own government and the Saudi-backed forces, they have shown, I mean, there have been a barrage of missiles they have used. They've used sophisticated equipment, and they have improvised and innovated. So yes, to some extent, one can say that one might have expected the Houthis to have done this at sea too. Now, very obviously, they're getting support from a lot of entities, and we know who they are. But even so, the use of missiles, cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, the use of helicopter coming in, I mean, that shows a high level of sophistication, because you're looking at flight envelopes, you're looking at correct way to land, you're also looking at intelligence information. I mean, yes, a lot of information about merchant ships movements are available through agencies and on the internet, but you need a certain amount of intelligence to sort of determine which ship, who is the owner, what is the cargo, and stuff like that. So obviously, Houthis have been very, very remarkable in upping the ante, so to say. I mean, this is very kind of dark humor, but in retrospect, the piracy in Gulf of Aden just about 10 or 15 years ago, the use of RPGs and ladders and fast boats now seems such an anachronism when you look at missiles and helicopters coming into land. So is this the future of maritime warfare at sea? Possibly so, and that raises lots of questions, because you often have now Houthis you can either call them state actors, non-state actors, something in between. How do you wage war? I mean, who do you respond to if such a thing happens? Do you do it on an episodic case-to-case basis? If you have to escalate, who do you escalate against? Who do you attack? How do you handle a whole lot of these issues? It creates problems, and it also shows that that even small entities supported by other countries can bring in tremendous sophistication, drones, precision guided missiles, helicopters, and a whole lot of that into warfare. The third point is it can also give a fillip to other forms of terrorism, piracy. I mean, after all, let's remember that the whole area there, you got the Al-Shabaab, you got, the other elements in Somalia. So possibly this can serve as an encouragement to many or all of them to start off, join the melee, so to say, and create these disruptions and take advantage of the differences between states when they respond to such situations. So I guess we have to wait and watch this situation very carefully. But some of the signs coming from there, including today morning's attack, clearly worrisome.
Clearly worrisome there. Thank you very much, Commodore Srikanth, for your insights on this very alarming Red Sea sharks attacks that we've been seeing in the last couple of weeks. And we'll keep coming back to you for your very unique insights onto this very unique conflict that's playing out in the Red Sea. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
He's India's most wanted gangster, but he's behind bars. That's right. Lawrence Bishnoi runs a thriving underworld gang from prison. Our upcoming story, Prison No Bar, looks at this very interesting gangster.
India's most high-profile prison, the Tihar Jail, is now the headquarters of the country's most notorious crime syndicate. Lodged within these walls is a man who was once a rising student leader, a national-level athlete, and an aspiring politician. Today, he's India's most dangerous gangster. You know him as Lawrence Bishnoi. And India's prisons are apparently no bar to how Bishnoi runs India's largest criminal empire.
December 16th is the 52nd anniversary of Vijay Diwas, the creation of Bangladesh, an event that altered South Asian geography and history. Now, the Battle of Basantar was a ferocious land battle between India and Pakistan. It was part of the Pakistan Army's war strategy that the defense of East Pakistan lay in the west. Turns out, the Pakistani junta failed on both fronts. Watch our story to find out how. And you can download the News9 Plus app on the Play Store and App Store. Thank you for watching.
One of the fiercest tank battles in the subcontinent is underway. A battle where the road to victory runs through minefields. Indian infantry and armor are racing against time to safeguard a vital military base at Pathankot. Indian forces dig in to repulse 6 counter-attacks by the enemy. This battle thwarts Pakistan's war plan of protecting its eastern wing through attacks in the west. In the fag end of the 1971 war, Battle of Basantar brings in the crushing defeat for Pakistan.